Amen.
Good morning, church. Today, our topic of exhortation is on miracles, and I will be talking about Elijah and the widow at Zarephath. So, this whole Bible miracle is from 1 Kings 17, verse 30 to 16, is what I will be reading from. So, the story begins with the widow at the gate, and she's gathering a few sticks so she can prepare the last meal for her and her son. And Elijah sees the woman and he asks for water. And she doesn't respond, but she goes to get it anyway. But then he later on says, actually, bring me some bread as well. And she responds by saying that she has nothing baked at all. And not only does she have nothing baked, but she has no supplies for food as well. And she says that she's going to gather these couple of sticks so that she can go home and prepare it for herself and her son, that they may eat the food and die. After hearing all of this, Elijah increases his request by saying, don't be afraid, go ahead and do just what you said, but make a little bread for me first. Then use what's left to prepare a meal for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. There will always be flour and olive oil left in your containers until the time when the Lord sends rain and the crops grow again. So she did as Elijah said, and Elijah said, and she and her family continued to eat for many days. There was always enough flour and olive oil left in containers, just as the Lord has promised through Elijah. So we see here this miracle is not a massive miracle, but it's still significant. As a lot of people would say, actually, the widow should have been the one that was being provided for instead of providing herself, as she had nothing to give. But I believe that is that obedience and trust that she had in God and also in Elijah that ended up saving her life and her son's life. As we see her faith, she didn't have to prepare that food and give it to Elijah. She could have chosen to say no and went and ate the food herself, and that would have been her last meal. But through that obedience, God sustained her household for the next however long it was. And all she had to do in that moment was believe. And I feel like this is very important because that choice was the choice between life and death. If she had chose to eat that food, she would have died later on. But she chose to sacrifice it for Elijah because she believed in herself that God would provide some way or another. And that ended up, providing life for her and her son. And it just goes to show that God's plans are so much more bigger than what we expect, and that it may often be surprising and unexpected, and we never really know what's coming next. But just believe that God always has a plan for us, and that we should trust in Him as He's never going to forsake us. And even when things get dire and things get dreadful and frustrating, there's always going to be a backup plan. There's always going to be a plan that God has for us, so we should believe in Him. And I feel like this scripture really shows about trusting the process, about believing that God is at work in our lives, and about Him helping us. So I would say some inspiration from the scripture is to think about how we can strengthen our faith in God, as you can see, this one had incredible faith, and we show that faith in everything we do. And we should also think about how who God has sent to us in our lives to help us as well. As Elijah has been sent to her life to help us. So we should think about our lives as well and think about who God has sent to help us. I will also be talking about miracles, and I'll be talking about the bleeding women. I think a lot of us are familiar with the story, but for those who are not, I'll be reading from Luke 8, verse 43 to 48. And the woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. Who touched me? Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you. But Jesus said, Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me. Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told him why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. Now, what does this tell us? What does this show us as Christians? First of all, it shows us how great God's power is. It shows us how great Jesus is. People think that maybe Jesus is not as great because they don't answer prayers on time. They may be praying for hours, days, months, and they're not receiving their blessing. And they just automatically think that Jesus isn't as powerful as the Bible tells him to be. But he is, and it shows us through this verse, simply just by touching his cloth, that made the woman healed. And this links to faith as a Christian. Yes, just because it's Jesus' cloth, it doesn't necessarily mean that she is automatically healed, but it was because of her faith, that's why she's healed. It could be any ordinary cloth. It could even be, I don't know, his shoe or his hair. But because she had faith, because she trusted in God, not only but in God, but in herself, that Jesus would heal her, she was healed. And this tells us as Christians that we need to have faith. Whenever a miracle is performed in the Bible, a reason why it happens is always because of faith. Even when it comes to like Jonah and the fish, or Peter and how he walked on water, it all happens because of faith, because they believed in God. So let us all have faith as we listen to this. Amen.
I'm going to be talking about Jesus' resurrection, which, in my opinion, is the ultimate miracle. We all know what happened here. Jesus died and he resurrected 3 days later. It says in Matthew 28, as the new day was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went out to visit the tomb. Suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, rolled aside the stone, and sat on it. His face shone like lightning, and his clothes were as white as snow. The guards shook with fear when they saw him, and they fell into a dead faint. The angel spoke to the woman, don't be afraid. I know you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He isn't here. He is risen from the dead, just as he said would happen. Come see where his body was lying. And now, go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead. Just like what Kelly and Miracle was saying, this miracle is basically shows how much faith really matters, because Jesus said early, it was prophesied before that Jesus would resurrect, but no one really believed it because, it's quite a shocking thing to hear someone being raised from the dead, but he did as well. And I think that this also shows the power of God's self-sacrifice, because he sent his only son to die in this miracle, and he was being very selfless in that. Thank you.